What you're about to hear is going to make your blood boil. After everything Paul Heyman has done for this company, after decades of loyalty, after carrying storylines on his back when nobody else could, after being the voice, the advocate, the mastermind behind the biggest draw in professional wrestling history, Triple H just walked into Smackdown and pulled the trigger. He fired Paul Heyman. Not quietly. Not with respect. Not with the dignity a man of Heyman's caliber deserves. He did it on live television in front of millions of people, humiliating a legend, discarding him like yesterday's trash, and the worst part? The absolute worst part? Most of you cheered. Most of you sat there in your living rooms, in those arenas, and you applauded as they destroyed the career of one of the most brilliant minds this industry has ever seen. And if that doesn't make you angry, if that doesn't make you question everything you think you know about loyalty in professional wrestling, then you haven't been paying attention. Because what happened on Smackdown wasn't just a firing. It wasn't just another corporate restructuring or a storyline twist. It was a betrayal of everything Paul Heyman built, everything he sacrificed, and everything he represents. And Triple H, the man who claims to be the savior of professional wrestling, the man who everyone praises for fixing WWE, just showed his true colors. He's not a savior. He's a corporate executioner dressed in a leather jacket, and Paul Heyman was just the latest victim on his hit list. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand the full scope of what's happening here. Paul Heyman isn't just some manager who shows up, cuts a promo, and collects a paycheck. This man revolutionized professional wrestling not once, but multiple times. When WWE was struggling in the 90s, when WCW was dominating the Monday Night Wars, it was Paul Heyman's ECW that gave us the blueprint for what wrestling could be. Extreme Championship Wrestling wasn't just hardcore matches and broken tables. It was about storytelling that felt real, characters that felt authentic, and a grittiness that made you believe every single word coming out of those wrestlers' mouths. Heyman created stars out of nobodies. He took Mick Foley and turned him into Cactus Jack, a legend. He took Steve Austin before he was stone cold and gave him the microphone time that would later define the Attitude Era. He took Rob Van Dam, Sabu, Taz, and countless others and made them household names with nothing but passion, creativity, and a maxed-out credit card. Then WWE came calling. Vince McMahon, the same man who had spent years trying to put ECW out of business, realized he needed Paul Heyman. He needed that creative genius, that ability to make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. And Heyman answered the call. He became a commentator, and suddenly SmackDown had the best commentary team in wrestling history with him and Jim Ross. He managed Brock Lesnar and turned a former NCAA champion into the most legitimate, most terrifying force WWE had ever seen. The Advocate wasn't just a nickname. It was a role that elevated Brock Lesnar from being another muscle-bound wrestler to being a once-in-a-generation attraction. Every word Heyman spoke made Lesnar more valuable. Every promo added millions to Brock's worth. Every carefully crafted sentence built the Lesnar mystique to mythological proportions. And then came Roman Reigns. When the entire WWE universe was turning on Roman, when every arena was booing him out of the building, when it seemed like the Roman Reigns experiment was a complete and total failure, who did WWE turn to? Paul Heyman. And what did Heyman do? He transformed Roman Reigns from the most hated wrestler in the company into the tribal chief, into the most compelling character in modern professional wrestling, into a box office draw that has carried WWE on his back for years. The Bloodline storyline, which everyone agrees is one of the greatest long-term storylines in WWE history, doesn't happen without Paul Heyman. Every twist, every turn, every emotional beat of that story has Heyman's fingerprints all over it. He made Solo Sikoa matter. He made the Usos must-see television. He turned Jimmy and G into legitimate main event stars. He gave depth and complexity to a storyline that could have been just another generic faction angle. So after all of that, after literally saving Roman Reigns' career, after being instrumental in creating the most financially successful era of SmackDown in the show's history, after proving time and time again that he is the most valuable non-wrestler on the entire roster, Triple H fires him. Just like that. On live television. In front of the world. And the reason given? The Vision. That's what they're calling it now. The Vision. This mysterious, ominous force that appeared on SmackDown, this group that's supposedly going to change everything, this faction that already has people talking and speculating and losing their minds with theories. Triple H brought them in, Triple H is behind them, and apparently, Paul Heyman was standing in their way. But let's talk about what really happened here, because the official story is never the whole story. Triple H didn't fire Paul Heyman because of the Vision. He fired Paul Heyman because Heyman represents everything Triple H can never be. Heyman is a pure creative mind, someone who thinks outside the box, someone who takes risks, someone who doesn't play corporate politics. Triple H, for all his accomplishments, for all his success, has always been the ultimate company man. He married the boss's daughter. He positioned himself perfectly for succession. He played the game, pun fully intended, better than anyone else in wrestling history. And now that he's in charge, now that he has the book, He doesn't want anyone around who might challenge him, who might have ideas that are better than his, who might remind everyone that there was someone else who could tell stories just as good or better. This is about ego. This is about control. This is about Triple H marking his territory and making sure everyone knows that WWE is his company now, not Vince McMahon's company, not Paul Heyman's company, his company. And if you think I'm being too harsh, if you think I'm reading too much into this, then explain to me why Heyman had to be fired on television. Explain to me why it couldn't have been handled privately, professionally, with the respect that someone of his tenure deserves. When WWE releases wrestlers, they usually do it quietly, put out a statement, wish them well in their future endeavors. But Heyman? No. He gets humiliated on live TV because Triple H wanted to make a statement. He wanted to show the vision, show the locker room, show the entire world that nobody is untouchable, that nobody is safe, that even a legend like Paul Heyman can be cast aside when it serves the narrative. And let's talk about the vision, because this group is either going to be the next big thing in professional wrestling or it's going to be the biggest flop we've seen in years, and there's really no in between. From what we saw on Smackdown, the Vision is being positioned as this revolutionary force, this group that's going to tear down the old guard and rebuild WWE in their image. They've got the look, they've got the presentation, they've got the mystery factor that WWE loves to use. But here's my problem. Here's why I'm skeptical. WWE has tried this before. How many times have we seen a new faction come in and promise to change everything? The Nexus was going to change everything until WWE completely bungled it. The Shield was going to change everything, and they actually did, but that was because of the talent involved, not because of the booking. Retribution was going to change everything, and we all know how that turned out. The Vision has potential, I'll give them that, but potential means nothing in WWE if the follow-through isn't there. And by firing Paul Heyman as part of their introduction, Triple H has put enormous pressure on this group to deliver. They have to be amazing now. They have to justify the firing of one of the most important figures in wrestling history. If the Vision fails, if they fizzle out in 6 months like so many other factions, then Paul Heyman's firing becomes even more tragic, even more pointless, even more cruel. What's really fascinating, and what's really telling about where WWE is headed, is how this reflects Triple H's philosophy versus Paul Heyman's philosophy. Heyman has always been about the individual, about building stars, about making people care about characters as if they were real human beings with real motivations and real emotions. Triple H, especially in his NXT days, has always been more about the system, about the machine, about WWE as a brand being bigger than any one person. The Vision represents that philosophy perfectly. It's not about individual stars, it's about the collective, about the group, about the faction being the draw rather than the people in it. And maybe that works. Maybe in today's wrestling landscape, with AEW, and New Japan and all these other companies competing for attention, maybe the way forward is creating these larger-than-life factions that people can't ignore. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is people like Paul Heyman who understand that wrestling, at its core, is about connecting with the audience on an emotional level. You want to know what really gets me angry about this whole situation? It's not just that Paul Heyman was fired. It's that this represents a larger trend in WWE of discarding people who have given everything to the company. Look at what happened to William Regal. Look at what happened to Road Dogg. Look at what happened to so many people who were loyal to WWE for decades, who sacrificed their bodies, their time, their relationships, everything, only to be shown the door when they were no longer considered useful. And we're supposed to just accept it because it's business, because that's how corporations work, because sentiment has no place in a publicly traded company. But wrestling isn't supposed to be just another corporation. Wrestling is supposed to be about honor, about respect, about taking care of the people who built this industry. Paul Heyman built this industry, and Triple H threw him away like a used tissue. If that doesn't make you angry, if that doesn't make you question your loyalty to WWE, then I don't know what will. Because today it was Paul Heyman, but tomorrow it could be anyone. It could be Michael Cole, who's been the voice of WWE for over 2 decades. It could be Corey Graves, who's become one of the best commentators in the business. It could be any of your favorite wrestlers who are currently riding high but might fall out of favor when the next big thing comes along. Nobody is safe in Triple H's WWE, and that's a terrifying reality for everyone who works there. Now, I can already hear some of you in the comments saying this is just a storyline, saying I'm working myself into a shoot, saying that Heyman will be back in a few months and this is all just drama to build up the Vision or to set up his eventual return. And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is all part of a larger plan. Maybe Heyman is going to show up in AEW in a few weeks, or maybe he's going to return to WWE as the mastermind behind some other faction that opposes the Vision. Maybe this is the start of a Heyman versus Triple H storyline that culminates at WrestleMania with their respective factions going to war. That's all possible, and if any of that happens, I'll be the first one to admit I got worked. But here's the thing. Even if it is a work, even if it is all storyline, the way they did it still matters. The humiliation still happened. The disrespect was still shown. And in an era where we're constantly being reminded that WWE is making record profits, that the company is more successful than ever, that everything is going great, why does that success have to come at the expense of people's dignity? Why does storytelling require the public humiliation of a legend? There are ways to write someone off television that don't involve burying them, that don't involve making them look weak or foolish or expendable. The reaction from the WWE universe has been mixed, and that's being generous. Some people are excited about the vision, excited about something new and different, excited about the possibilities of where this storyline might go. Other people, like myself, are furious that WWE would treat Paul Heyman this way, that they would discard someone who has been so instrumental to their success. And then there's a third group, maybe the largest group, who are just confused. They don't understand why this happened now, why it happened this way, what it means for the future of Smackdown and the future of the Bloodline storyline and the future of everyone involved. That confusion is intentional. WWE wants you talking about this. They want you debating this. They want you going online and arguing with strangers about whether this was the right move or the wrong move. They want engagement, they want clicks, they want views, because that's what drives their business now. It's not about putting on the best wrestling show or telling the best stories, it's about creating moments that trend on social media, that generate headlines, that get people talking. And in that sense, mission accomplished. Everyone is talking about Paul Heyman's firing. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone is engaged. But at what cost? At what point does the desire for viral moments and social media engagement override the responsibility to tell coherent, respectful, emotionally resonant stories? At what point does WWE's obsession with being the biggest entertainment company in the world make them forget that they're a wrestling company first and foremost, and that wrestling fans care about different things than casual entertainment consumers? Paul Heyman understands this better than almost anyone. He's always said that his job is to make you care, to make you feel something, whether that's joy or anger or excitement or sadness. He's a master manipulator of emotion, and he does it not through cheap tricks or shock value, but through careful, deliberate storytelling that builds over time and pays off in meaningful ways. The Bloodline storyline is the perfect example. It wasn't built on surprise returns or celebrity appearances or shocking firings. It was built on character development, on relationships, on family dynamics that anyone could relate to. It was compelling because it felt real, because it felt earned, because every step of the story made sense and built on what came before. The vision, as it's being presented so far, is the opposite of that. It's all shock value, all mystery, all spectacle. And maybe that works for some people. Maybe there are fans who just want to be surprised, who want to see something unexpected happen, who don't care about the logic or the character work or the long-term implications. But for those of us who love wrestling because of the stories, because of the characters, because of the emotional investment we have in these performers, the vision feels hollow right now. It feels like WWE is trying to recreate the mystery of the Wyatt family or the Ministry of Darkness without understanding what made those groups work. What made those groups work was that they had a leader with a clear vision, pun not intended this time. Bray Wyatt knew exactly who the Wyatt family was and what they represented. The Undertaker knew exactly who the Ministry of Darkness was and what they were trying to accomplish. The vision, at least from what we've seen so far, is just a group of people in matching outfits saying ominous things about changing WWE. That's not a vision, that's a vibe. And vibes don't sustain long-term storytelling. Here's what should have happened. If Triple H wanted to introduce the vision and establish them as a major threat, he should have built them up over time. He should have had them interfere in matches, cost people opportunities, slowly reveal their motivations and their goals. And when it came time for them to take out a major figure, when it came time for them to make their statement, they should have been the ones to do it, not Triple H. The vision should have attacked Paul Heyman. They should have beaten him down. They should have forced him out of WWE through their actions, establishing themselves as this ruthless, unstoppable force that even legends can't stand against. That would have given the vision instant credibility. That would have made them feel dangerous. That would have made fans care about them, either because they wanted to see the vision succeed or because they wanted to see someone stand up to them and take them down. Instead, Triple H did the dirty work himself, and the vision just stood there looking menacing. It makes them feel less like an independent force and more like Triple H's personal enforcers. It makes them feel less like revolutionaries and more like corporate stooges. And that's a problem because if the vision is just going to be another faction that follows orders from management, why should we care? We've seen that story 100 times. The Authority, the corporation, every evil boss faction in wrestling history has had their muscle who do what they're told. The vision was supposed to be different. They were supposed to be the ones in control, the ones with the actual vision for WWE's future. But by having Triple H fire Heyman and having the vision just stand behind him, it immediately establishes the power dynamic in the wrong direction. Let's also talk about the timing of all this, because it's suspicious as hell. We're a few months away from WrestleMania season. Storylines are starting to take shape. Plans are being finalized. And suddenly, in the middle of all that, Paul Heyman gets fired. Why now? If this was really about the vision needing to make an impact, why not do it closer to the Royal Rumble or closer to Elimination Chamber when more eyes are on the product? The timing suggests one of two things. Either this is a panic move because WWE feels like SmackDown's ratings need a jolt, or this is setting up something massive for WrestleMania that involves Heyman coming back in a major way. I'm hoping it's the latter. I'm hoping that this is all part of a master plan that will make sense in 3 or 4 months when we see the full picture. I'm hoping that Paul Heyman walks into WrestleMania with a faction of his own, or that he returns as the secret mastermind behind something even bigger than the vision, or that this is all setting up the eventual downfall of Triple H's regime and the return of a more talent-friendly era. But I've been watching WWE long enough to know that hope is a dangerous thing. For every long-term story that pays off brilliantly, there are 5 that get dropped or forgotten or completely bungled. And that's what makes this so frustrating. Paul Heyman deserves better than to be a maybe, better than to be a question mark, better than to be part of a storyline that might or might not pay off depending on how WWE feels in a few months. He deserves the certainty of knowing that his contributions are valued, that his legacy is secure, that his place in wrestling history is guaranteed. Instead, he's been put in a position where his reputation and his dignity are dependent on whether or not WWE's creative team can stick the landing on whatever story they're trying to tell. The wrestlers in the locker room have to be watching this very carefully. They have to be thinking about their own futures, their own job security, their own relationships with management. If someone like Paul Heyman, someone with his track record and his importance to the company, can be dismissed so casually, then what chance do they have? The message being sent is clear: nobody is untouchable, nobody is safe, and loyalty means nothing when it conflicts with whatever Triple H's current vision is for the company. Some of you might say I'm being too dramatic, that wrestlers know this is a business and that people get released all the time. And you're right, people do get released. But there's a difference between releasing someone because of budget cuts or because they're not being used and humiliating someone on live television as part of a storyline. When WWE releases wrestlers quietly, at least there's some dignity in it. They can go to another company, rebuild their brand, create a new narrative for themselves. But when you're fired as part of a storyline, you become part of WWE's narrative whether you want to be or not. Your departure becomes content for them. Your pain becomes their entertainment. And if the storyline doesn't work, if the vision flops, then you were sacrificed for nothing. That's what's really at stake here. Paul Heyman's legacy, his reputation, everything he's built over 40 years in this business is now tied to whether or not the vision succeeds. If they become the next big thing, then maybe history will look back on this as a necessary sacrifice, as the moment that ushered in a new era. But if they fail, Heyman's firing becomes just another example of WWE's creative team not knowing what they're doing, of Triple H not being the genius booker everyone thinks he is, of the company being more interested in shock value than substance. I want the vision to succeed. Despite everything I've said, despite my anger at how this went down, I genuinely want them to be amazing. I want them to prove me wrong. I want them to justify Paul Heyman's firing by being so compelling, so entertaining, so revolutionary that we all look back and say, okay, it was worth it, that had to happen to get us here. But I'm not holding my breath. WWE's track record with factions over the past decade has been spotty at best, and asking the vision to not only succeed but to succeed enough to retroactively justify firing Paul Heyman is an incredibly high bar to clear. What happens next is anyone's guess. Maybe Heyman shows up on AEW Dynamite next week and cuts a promo that burns WWE to the ground. Maybe he takes some time off and comes back to WWE in 6 months as a surprise return. Maybe he retires and decides he's given enough to this business. Whatever happens, one thing is certain: professional wrestling is worse off without Paul Heyman on our screens every week. His promos are must-see television. His presence elevates everyone around him. His mind for storytelling is unmatched. Removing him from WWE programming makes the product objectively worse, and no amount of mysterious factions or surprising debuts can change that fundamental truth. So yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry that WWE treated a legend with such disrespect. I'm angry that Triple H thought this was the right way to introduce the vision. I'm angry that so many fans are just accepting this as normal, as just another day in sports entertainment. And I'm angry that we might never get to see Paul Heyman advocate for Roman Reigns again, never get to see him cut one of his legendary promos again, never get to see him do what he does better than anyone else in this business. That's a loss for all of us, whether you realize it yet or not. Paul Heyman's firing isn't just about him. It's about what it represents, about where WWE is headed, about whether loyalty and legacy still matter in this company, or if it's all just content to be used and discarded when something shinier comes along. And if you're not angry about that, if you're not questioning what this means for the future of professional wrestling, then you're not paying close enough attention. This is bigger than Paul Heyman. This is bigger than the vision. This is about the soul of WWE, and what Triple H is willing to sacrifice to make his mark on this company. Only time will tell if it was worth it.